If I told you my story, you would hear hope that wouldn't let go. And if I told you my story, you would hear love that never gave up. And if I told you my story, you would hear life, but it wasn't mine. If I should speak, then let it be of the grace that is greater than all my sin, of when justice was served and where mercy wins, of the kindness of Jesus that draws me in. Oh, to tell you my story.
I have been blessed by working with Jason Slaughter. He's a mentor. He's a God-fearing man, and I would consider him my best friend.
Pastor Jason Slaughter and Community Share Ministry, that they have given us a second chance at life, along with the Lord and the Holy Spirit.
He believed in me when everybody else had given up on me. Yes, Lord. And if not for Community Share Ministries, I would have died on the streets.
It's like he took a bunch of nobodies and made us somebody.
Amen.
It's an awesome place. It's really helped me a lot, helped me get closer to the Lord, and helped me to really be a better man overall.
Pastor does God's work, and if it wasn't for him doing what God had asked him to do and have this ministry, I would not be here today.
No me.
I mean, I was at the point of giving up, and I was just going to let that man kill me.
Jason's the first to tell you, he's no genius. He just does what God asked him to do.
I guess you can say where my life really began was the day I got saved. I got saved when I was 11 years old at Senior Baptist Church, and life was good. Best friend in the world, by a young man by the name of Daniel Reddish. He was 17 years old and 2 weeks away from graduating. We had he was my next door neighbor. We spent a lot of time together, just getting into stuff as teenagers would, and we had played baseball early that day, and was coming by to pick me up that afternoon at 9 o'clock. And 9:05 come by, and Danny hadn't showed up, and so I figured he got busy and just went on home. And as soon as I got home, I'd got the news that he'd been in a wreck, and my best friend in the world had lost his life. But it was so devastating to me that I turned my back on God. So here I was, 17-year-old, and I had a couple buddies of mine that got together with me and wanted to start a country band, and so we did. We got out and started making music and traveling and playing in places that I should not be playing, and singing songs that I should not be singing, and entertaining the people that I should not be entertaining too. And I never will forget one night we were in a place and it was so dark, and you could just see the evil all around that place, and it was like the Lord was revealing to me what we were playing to and what we were entertaining to. And I looked at my bass player that night, and it was like he looked at me and said, "It's like we're in the middle of hell tonight." And it just kind of stopped me right in my tracks, because I didn't know if he was seeing or was feeling what I was feeling, and I never have ever even asked him that, but it was just so odd that he said that. So I could feel the pressure of the Lord revealing to me all those things that I need to step away from. The next week we went to play in a place just about the same way. I mean, it was a lot of stuff going on. As I started to leave the place that morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I had opened the door to come out of the place. There was a lady that was had been in the bar that night, and she was literally hanging out of the back seat of a car as I was walking out of that bar that night, screaming to the top of her lungs that, you know, that I'm going straight to hell. And the Lord just began to pound me. He said, this is what you're entertaining to. This is what you're doing. And I didn't call you to do this. So I went on home that night and tried to go to sleep and tossed and turned. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I got out of bed. There under the night table was my Bible that I'd had. I had to dust it off because I definitely hadn't been reading it. And the Lord was just saying, turn your life over to me, son, and have peace. And that's what I was wanting, was peace. I was living in chaos, actually, all that time. And there in my living room floor that night, I laid down on the carpet. I literally laid down, and I remember beating my fist on the floor and saying, Lord, I'm sorry. I have failed you. And I don't want to be a part-time. I don't want to be a so-called. Lord, if I'm going to do this, I'm giving you all that I've got. And I remember saying that and saying, Lord, I was sorry, as the tears flew from fell down from my eyes that night. So it definitely was a movement inside of my spirit. I remember going back telling the band that it was over, and we had a couple of contracts left that we had to play. And I told them, I said, and instead of us getting sued, that I would go ahead and fulfill my contract's duties, and we went ahead and played those shows. I remember my band sitting there and saying, you know, you found religion and you can't give this up. We've been playing for 13 years together, and it was definitely in my mind, I was thinking, how in the world can I give that up too? But I knew God was calling me away from it. So the last show we played was a New Year's Eve show. We got down to the last song that night, and I had bought a 20X Stetson hat to fit my bucket head in Nashville. Took that hat off that night and throwed it in the crowd and told everybody good night. And I remember that moment as I looked at my fiddle player that night, and she looked at me in tears and said, you ain't coming back, are you? And I said, no. I said, it's over. I said, I'm done. I said, I'm not coming back. Very shortly after leaving the band, the Lord introduced me to my wife. About a year into dating, then we got married. And after a year after being married, we had our first child. And I know that God had all of that sitting there waiting on me to get myself right. And I'm so thankful that I made that decision to turn my life back to Him. Me and my dad, we run a convenience store there in town, and my dad's health had really went downhill, and the store really wasn't doing well, and we were forced to have to sell our store. That was a blow to me because that was part of our income, and I didn't know what we were going to do. And I remember about a company called Verizon that had came in our community and was putting up towers and was selling cell phones, and I remember calling them up on the phone and introducing myself to them about possibly putting a store in Cedartown. And I remember them driving down and coming, and they called me back after they come in and interviewed me and the area, and just said that Cedartown was not on their radar, that they had a store in Rome, and they was pretty satisfied with just having that store. Me being persistent with them and keep calling them, and finally they decided to give us an opportunity to open up a store in Cedartown. At a time where nobody had cell phones, everybody wanted them, and we sold a lot of them. And through that, we wound up opening up 5 Verizon stores. We also had 2 candy and ice cream stores. We were doing real well. With all that going on with our business, we was also very busy in our church at that time. And I was a youth director at the church, band driver, Sunday school director, choir director, just about anything that was asked of me, deacon at the church. But I knew deep down inside I had a bigger calling. I can remember speaking at my father's funeral. And after the funeral was over with, my pastor talking with him, he called me over to the side and said, son, I need to ask you a question. And I said, Brother Teddy, what is it? He said, are you sure that God hasn't called you to do something that you're not doing? And I remember telling him, Brother Teddy, if God's called me to preach, I'll preach, but he's not calling me to preach. So it was to the point that I basically was sitting there lying to my own preacher at my dad's grave. I believe, without a doubt, this calling to preaching is a very serious matter, and that was difficult. That was part of the fight of letting go and letting God do what He needed to do in my life.
And God, today we come to you and we ask you, Father, that you'll just be with us for a little while.
So finally, about after 7 years of running from the Lord, I announced my call to preach. I remember sitting down with my wife that night, a very emotional time, and telling her what God had called me to do. Her response was, I was wondering when that was going to happen, because she already knew in her heart. Almost immediately, God began to show me a vision of where we were going, or what He wanted me to do. I've always had a heart for people that were homeless and people that was in drug addictions, and so He wanted us to start a shelter for men and one for women and also for children. So doing that meant that we had to walk away from our stores, and we could have sold them, but the Lord wanted us to shut them down. We could have run them during that time, but the Lord knew that our attention had to be on what He called us to do. So we went from 6 figures to no figures overnight. And I tell people, it don't take you long to figure that don't figure.
I'll never forget the day that Jason came in and he said, you know, Ginger, God's moving my roots. And I was like, okay, you know, what do you mean? And he was like, I think God's telling me that I need to shut all the stores down. And I was like, not sell them? You know, and he's like, no, you know, I just need to shut the stores down. And I was like, you know, so I didn't have the trust and the faith I feel like that he had. He's always been a visionary, and so sure enough, he said, we're going to have plenty of clothes and plenty of food, and we did. I will never forget the time that we were at our old warehouse. We had, clothes everywhere. I mean, we would often say that it was Mount Everest, you know, and so the boys, every time we would get out of the car, they would just go running to that mount of clothes. But God has truly blessed us. He has took care of us, and just trusting in Him, that's what we had to do.
I wrote a letter to our community, to whom it may concern, because everybody knew we were in business. We had them at the store, in our Verizon store. I said we were going to shut down the store March the 1st and start Community Share Ministries. That's what we did.
If it wasn't for Community Share, it's our whole life. It's what meant everything to us. I came to know Jesus there. I got my salvation there. I met my wife there. I met my best friend ever in the history of the world, Jeff Arnold, there. He's the best man in our wedding. The place means everything to me.
At the end of the day, you can read books and you can have instructors, and but if you don't have the instructor, if God is not the focal point of it, with your sobriety coming along with that focal point, I could see easily how it could fail.
We knew that God was doing something that was going to alter our belief in Him to another level, and also taking us to somewhere we've never been before with Him. Being a businessman, I sat down and wrote a 10-year plan. We were going to open a thrift store up for the first couple of years and run it to generate revenue to open up a men's home. And about the 3rd year in the ministry of having a 10-year plan, we were going to open up the men's home and then later open up the women's home and then the children's home. And the Lord just politely took my plan and wadded it up and throwed it away. We opened up the thrift store there in town. It was an old car dealership building. And we had homeless men showing up just almost immediately. They were coming in saying we didn't have a place to stay. We heard you had a shelter, and we were telling them we didn't have a shelter. And realization of it, God was ready and we wasn't. And But we had men sleeping in those offices of that car dealership building. And I told those men, I said, you know, don't walk around in here at night, because if the police would see you, they literally could shut us down, because it was a commercial building. And but I couldn't turn them away. There was a house in our community that used to house the battered women's shelter. They had built a new building, and they had moved out. It was a 7-bedroom, 5-bath house. I went over to the county commissioner's office. The county owned the house. Talked with the county manager about us obtaining the property. And the county manager said, we don't want the house. It's an older home, and we're going to put it up in the paper for a sealed bids on the house. And you know, I remember telling him that morning, we don't have any money. We're just getting started. And remember when I reached to grab the door that day, he said, hey, just bid something on it. But I also know that the Lord said He will guide your footsteps. The Lord directed me over to the city of Cedartown. The house was inside the city. Several years ago, I was a county commissioner in Polk County, and through that, I knew that governments can give other properties and things to other government entities. And so I went over to the city of Cedartown and met with the city manager. And I introduced myself to him and told him about what God had called me to do about helping men get off the streets. And I told him about the house that was over 2 blocks away from where we were at. And I was asking him if he would to ask the county, could they give the house over to the city, and then the city work out some kind of deal with us where we could start to take care of these men. With no hesitation, that morning he said he would. And then I didn't know whether he just got rid of me politely, or he was really wanting to help us do what we'd asked him to do. A couple of weeks rocked by. He gave me a call and said he had the deed to the house at the city, and me and him need to sit down and talk. At that precise time, I mean, I knew this calling was real, but I knew for sure that God's hand was on this ministry and what we were starting. They gave us the house for $1 a year. So we moved the men in there, and we got started.
And if I told you my story, you would hear love.
I've got a unique understanding of the ministry. I came in here through Highland Rivers as being an addict and a client. But before I ended up there, I grew up in a Beaver Cleaver household, had a wonderful family, I had a wonderful life. I chose to start doing drugs. The drugs have took me to a point where I lost everything, alienated my family, and became homeless. I came into this program in November of 2011. Immediately, God started affecting me when I came in here. The most strong thing that happens is our Bible studies and helping other people. And I started realizing that I could help people. I became the director in 2013 of August of the men's program. At that time, I had been able to see miracles happen with the men and women in the programs. I've seen God save them. I've seen them restore their lives. More importantly, I see them get a wonderful understanding with Jesus Christ. Our program for the men in the men's home runs like this. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I make coffee. And then about 5:30, we wake the men up. We have a good breakfast. We all help clean up. And then we have Bible study. And our Bible studies are out of the daily bread in the Bible. After Bible study, we head down to the thrift store. We get there about 8 o'clock in the morning. We make food bags that they hand out to people that are in need. And by doing that, the men and the women start healing. They start realizing they can help people and make a difference. We basically try to nurture the people that are coming in hurt. After we close up the thrift store, we come home, we eat dinner. But the most important thing is after we help clean up, we have a very in-depth Bible study. And I really like it when my men take it upon themselves to want to do the Bible study. Some of our Bible studies can last an hour and a half to 2 hours. And it's amazing, and I get to watch them start growing with Christ, and it's the most amazing thing. We've had men turn their lives over to Christ in this home at night, and everybody gets excited because basically we want to see people get saved and their lives right.
Well, I was straight living for the devil. I was staying up for days at a time. I always had a bottle of whiskey by my side. I would look in the mirror and I was not happy with what I saw. And it was to the point where I was just about at the end of hope, when I was finally stripped away of everything, when it was nothing but me and God, and I had to cry out. That's when change started happening. And that's when God started putting the things in motion for me to come to Cedartown. I had a good friend of mine that I went to high school with, actually came in the program, and he was an atheist in high school. He used to argue against the existence of God. Hadn't talked to him for a while. I finally got a hold of him. He told me he was here at Community Share Ministries, and he'd found Jesus. I said, whoa. Now, if he can come up here and that can happen to him, then that might be what I need to do. I've always shied away from calling the ministry a rehab, and a lot of people do. It is in fact not a rehab. To me, it is purest form is an introduction to Jesus. That's what it was for me. I knew stories of the Bible, but I had no idea. Got into that men's home. We had 2 Bible studies, one in the morning, one at night, every day. It started sinking in. I really wanted to learn. I really wanted to get in the Word. But the ministry down at the warehouse was pretty cool because you saw people that were a lot worse shape than you were. They were coming in looking for food and for clothes, and a lot of people didn't have anything. And to be able to help somebody when you're not really in a position to help anybody, but that was therapy to me. That's how God started healing me, was by putting me in a position where I could help others. And in doing so, I stopped worrying about myself and started loving and caring on other people. And that's when the change started happening.
Several months rocked by, and I felt the Lord tugging at my heart about owning the property. I knew how governments work, and I knew how people get in and out of being commissioners, and the Lord says you got to protect yourself, and you need to have the deed to this house. And so I remember going back to him, talking with him again, and saying, I appreciate you what you've done for us, and I even laughed about me paying my rent on time and the dollar. But I said, we really need to have the deed to this house, and I don't know how that can work out. And he said, well, you kind of put me in a unique situation because of, the county gave it to us. It'd be hard for us to sell it to you at that rate. So he said, nevertheless, he said, let me check and see what we can do. And so a couple of weeks went by again, and maybe 3 weeks to a month, he picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, if you can come down here today, he said, I have the deed to this house, and he said, bring me a check. And that really scared me when he called and said that, because, we could bring a check down there, but that doesn't mean we have the money, and I had no idea what he was going to even ask for it. But I got down to his office that day, and I remember him telling me that we've got the deed here, and the attorney is going to do the closing for free, and that we only need $75 to pay the secretary of the attorney for drawing the deed up. So that house, a 7-bedroom, 5-bath house, the first house that we had, cost a total of $76, which is incredible.
I come from a successful background, a good raising, great parents, great family. I had gone through a lot of struggles in my life. I got drinking and trying to cope and trying to internalize and deal with everything. And the more I drank, the more I drank. I was a functioning alcoholic. I had a successful job. I was a project manager for a local electrical company. I was married to my high school sweetheart this whole time, 3 beautiful boys. In the latter stages of drinking, went in the hospital. They told me I needed to go on a program, pride and, I got it all together. I got this handled. I can do it on my own type deal. I left the hospital, refused treatment, and was sober for 3 months. And I thought, okay, I can't control this. And after 3 months, I had one little misstep, and just opened the floodgates.
So there's a lot of changes there in our life with starting the ministry. Even the church that we went to for 13 years, A lot of the members, or some of the members, or leadership of the church wasn't really happy of us bringing in homeless men into the church, and we definitely wasn't able to tithe like we were because we wasn't in business anymore. And so a lot of those dynamics started changing, and really God began to impress on my heart that I'm bringing these men in that are broken, that are lost, and telling them about the love of Jesus, and I've got people that are giving them cold shoulders. So in the middle of all of that, we launched a church, which was also difficult to do. It was definitely different for us to walk away. My kids was raised up in that church, but God knew that our order was to protect those ones and to be a shepherd of those ones that we were bringing in and trying to teach them about Jesus Christ. A year after we had the men's home open, we had women showing up. I never will forget being at the store one day, and there was a lady in our community there that had been on the streets for a while, and she walked in our store one day and asked to meet with me, and said she was tired and that she wanted help, and she heard that we had a women's home, and I said, we do not have a women's home. We're in the process of maybe a year from now opening one, but we took her to detox, and she called me and said, now I'm out. What do I do now? And we didn't want to put her into a motel. It's kind of like throwing a rabbit in a briar bush. There's so much drug activities and things that was going on in those. So God reminded me, that we had a building there in town where our Verizon store used to be, and it was empty at the time. So I had a lady that was sleeping in my old office in my main store there in Cedartown that was recovering from heroin. So if somebody would have told me back when I was in business that someone that was on drugs would be sleeping in my office every night, I would have told them you lost your mind. I remember on the front end when I wrote that letter, and now I know why I wrote the letter to the community, we had a lady that came up to our store and had that letter in hand. She was a real estate agent here in town. She was also on the board of W.D. Tripp Foundation, and Mr. Tripp was a successful businessman in Cedartown, and he didn't have any family. He left his money to a trust. And she says, what you're saying in this letter is everything that W.D. Tripp was wanting to give his money toward. And she said, if you ever need us, please call us. We want to help you. We found a home there in Cedartown, the 2-story duplex home for the ladies, and we went to the Tripp Foundation, and the Tripp Foundation bought that home for us. I think it was $68,000. Now we're 2 homes in, we're still $76 into this whole thing. It was really amazing what God was doing. It wasn't long, we had that house full of ladies, and God put a director in our place to help get that up and get it going.
If I told you my story, you would hear a victory over the enemy. And if I told you my story.
I've been an addict since I was 15. I've struggled with addiction all my life, been an alcoholic. I've lost 4 kids. I lost myself along the way. I just thought that was a lifestyle that I would always be in until I come to Community Share Ministries. And I was here about 2 days and I found God. I accepted Jesus as my Savior. A week later, I got baptized. 3 months later, I became director of the women's home. I've done a lot of healing with the women. It helped me to just work with them. Since then, I've been here 11 months. I recently got married, and I just enjoy life now.
I've struggled with addiction since I was 12 years old. I was a functioning addict for many years, and until my children were grown. I have 3 children. They're all grown now. Due to addiction, I lost my home. I lost a new truck, everything that I had. And before it was all over with, I was using meth so heavy, I was high every day. I lived to get high. I was walking the streets day and night, just, going from house to house, anywhere that I knew that there was drugs. People were shutting the doors in my face. They didn't want to see me coming. I had gotten so bad that I burned every bridge. Nobody wanted anything to do with me.
First of all, give God all the glory and honor for everything that He's brought me through. At age 11, I started using meth. Spent 13 to 18 in juvenile hall. The day I turned 18, I flew here to Georgia. I'm a mother of 6. Since age 11, I've constantly had my running shoes on. Running, searching for something more. I lost myself in the process. They found me at the graveyard. My body, my soul, my spirit, every part of me was just exhausted. I was done. I was dead, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The police brought me here to the women's house, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I'm so thankful. I've been here 5 months. I have purpose. I have life. I'll start my new job on Monday. I plan on getting a home for my kids. And the Lord's just reaching down and wiping up the mess that I made of my life.
Before I came here, I was in a very bad domestic violence situation. I had an apartment in Rome, and he attacked me at my apartment, and so I then went to the battered women's shelter, and I stayed there, but I refused to surrender my apartment. They're like, you need to go to Cedartown, and I was like, there's nothing for me in Cedartown. I'm not leaving my home. Well, we ended up getting evicted because the police had been called out there, so my son and I were homeless, and we were living in my van for about 4 months, and he was chasing us everywhere we went. So before I came here, it was a life of despair and fear, and DFACS was pretty much knocking on the door because they could tell that he was homeless, and they had heard, and so I was ready to give up. And when I came in, I was broken, beaten down. I just wanted somewhere safe and a meal, pretty much, and for my child to be safe. I was scared at first, but I ended up finding the best friend that I've ever looked for my whole life, and that's Jody. She was the director of the women's home, and I found my precious husband. When you do what we do at the thrift store, and you pray with people, and you witness miracles, and you help people that are in need, it's not hard to see someone's heart, and that's what attracted me to him.
The way our program works is we don't have a set time of how long they can be in our program, but we do have a 90-day probational period.
They have to work with us in the thrift store or whatever we're doing. It could be working at the church, or it could be helping somebody out, or whatever it may be. They can't have a cell phone, and they can't have a job for the first 90 days. And that's basically for them to work on their self. A lot of people's coming in with drug addictions and struggles from their past, and one benefit with that is they're with us every day. So if they feel like they have an urge to go use something, or they're having a bad day or whatever, we're right here with them. And the Bible says iron sharpens iron, and we are our brother's keeper. So a lot of time we'll see the men in the back or the women praying together, and that shows us that one of them's dealing with something, and they've took it upon themselves to call and tell each other and say, I need your prayer.
A lot of people are trying to do Matthew 25 alive, and they're trying to do it on their own. But when I met Jason Slaughter, the Lord truly had his hands on him, just open up the windows of heaven. And so it was just smart to partner with him, somebody that's already doing what I'm trying to do, and starting over. You don't have, oftentimes in ministry, I think people are always trying to reinvent the wheel. And when God has already opened the floodgates on this man's life, it was just smart for me to partner with him and help better serve the community.
I think why our program is so successful is we don't talk people. And what I mean by that is we don't set them in a classroom environment and tell them why the endorphins of their brains does this or that and the other. We work with them on loving others and giving to others. And I think that's the biggest part of our success story is we have people walk in our ministry that doesn't have anything to eat in the community. We give out about 20,000 pounds of food a month. So we do that through the hands of the people that's in our program. They're the ones that's handing the food. They're the ones that's coming in. Somebody's house that's burnt down. Somebody needs clothing. Somebody needs furniture, or somebody might need, just something simple, bedding, towels, or wash rags. They're the one that we actually hand that off to and let them help those people. And through that, it's therapeutic to them.
It was just amazing when I came to be a part of the food giveaway that Jason and Community Share teamed up with. There's Hope for the Hungry. And we served 200 plus people that day. And so there's definitely a need in the community of those who are hurting and struggling. And so it just blessed my heart. And not only that, my family, my daughter, who was 14, my wife and my mother-in-law, they all came down to be a part of what was taking place here in the community. And I think everybody needed to come alongside and to be a blessing to those who are in need.
Most heartfelt story that I've had since I've been in the ministry is we were out giving out food one day, and there were hundreds of people in line. And one of our men that was in our program, I seen him over there brushing the tears back from his eyes, and I remember going over talking to him. I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he says, "This is incredible." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know, it's amazing." And he said, "No, you don't understand." He said, "This is the first time I've ever been on this side of the line." He said, "I've always been on the other side of the line." And that just spoke volumes to me that it was blessing him to bless others. He was a taker, or someone who had to be given to all the time, and now he was the one that was given. And I could see healing going on inside of him at that time.
We've had some incredible success stories for those who listen.
We have a nice little house on 5 acres on the edge of town. We both got real good jobs. Got us a little puppy. Just life is good.
And we're currently taking the classes to become foster parents.
Yeah.
I go to the thrift store every day. Every day I have to go, and I go to Bible studies at the women's home. He goes to Bible studies at the men's home. I feel like it keeps me humble and it keeps me grounded, and plus I can tell them, hey, don't give up, because there is hope and you're in a good place.
Well, the next day in the hospital, the drinking got worse because there was a brief moment where I was back to normal, and then it just went off the rails. Couldn't function. I was not a functioning alcoholic. I was just a straight alcoholic. My wife was done with me. She didn't want me to die. She didn't want to leave me, but she was done with that part of my life. She couldn't do it anymore. Laying in that hospital bed, they pretty much said, we don't know if you're gonna make it. Not dealing with my past, I'd gotten to the point where I just wanted to give up. This time, they said, you're going somewhere. Not my family, the doctors said, we won't release you from the hospital unless you go somewhere. When Jason came in, he said, we can help you. I was doing what I needed to do to look like I was doing all the right things. I didn't have a relationship with God. And Jason said it's a faith-based program. Mr. Jeff Arnold comes walking in the door, and I thought, well, this ain't Jason. He said, it's kind of like a fraternity house. You ever been to a fraternity house? And I thought, I hadn't. I said, no, I have never been in one. He said, well, it's fun. It's a group of guys. It was not a fraternity house.
One thing I like to do with the men after they've been here about 60 days is I like to have them sit with me when I'm bringing another addict into the program, because they get to see then differently from how an addict views the relationship of addiction, but sees how it hurts the family. The men here get to see the support that we've got in the community. They're ostracized in their addiction. They start getting support. We deal with the sheriff departments. They're wonderful people. They come in and do Bible studies. Other churches come in and do Bible studies. They start networking. They also start learning they can have clean fun. And it has one of the most profound impacts.
But our goal is if we can get them to a week, to 30 days, and we can get them to 60 days and 60 to 90 days. And if we can get them to 90 days, we've got them in a good spot that they could be successful by going forward. Some of these people, like I said, never had sobriety in their life, so they don't know how it is to live without being on the drug. And so once they start feeling like a human being again and actually not having to worry about that in their system, you can really start doing some good things with them. We don't take any money from the government. We have solely run this ministry off what people has donated and what we have come through our thrift store. Most of the time, or majority of the time, the money from the government comes with handcuffs. And what I mean by that is we have Bible study in the morning and at night. We require them to go to church. We know the answer to the problem, and the answer is Jesus Christ. So if the government was giving us their money, we wouldn't be able to do that. So we realize that. So we have not received any money at all from the government.
It was 2 weeks before I could even go to the thrift store. They had to have somebody stay at the house with me. One, to make sure I wouldn't slip some way, and two, literally make sure I wouldn't fall and couldn't get up. It'll change your life, because it changed my life. It saved my life. I was in the program, I think it ended up being like 5 months. That couple of weeks and then a couple of weeks in the warehouse, you know, you get that thought as, oh, okay, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this. I probably could live, you know, at home and just still come here. And, you know, the devil puts all that stuff in your head because he wants you out of that program, because that program, that ministry works. It's the last place the devil wants any addict to walk into. My wife had started coming to church, and so I could see my kids. Didn't really even want to sit with me. We didn't sit together. Her coming around, coming in that facility, and just watching me and watching everybody and talking to everybody, because the one thing in our program you cannot do is hide anything. There's eyes everywhere, which is a great thing. I don't say that in a derogatory way, but she's seen that I was a changed person. And I give God all the glory, but I feel as though I'd be remiss if I didn't give Community Share Ministry and Jason Slaughter a lot of the praise for following God's will and doing this to not just save my life, but to save a lot of people's lives.
I was asked to serve on a board out at Camp Antioch by Dr. McBride, that's over the Baptist Association there in Polk and Haralson County. The board had been through some dissension. I mean, they had some break-ins at the camp, and they've had a lot of problems there with the board members, half of them wanting to sell the camp, half of them wanting to keep it. So my first board meeting that night was kind of interesting. I was thinking, you know, it's definitely not a good situation to come in on. When I was there that night, I asked them, I said, you know, what all does this board do? And they said, we're over the camp here, and we're also over a children's home out on Piedmont Highway. So I began to wonder what God had put me in to and why he did that. About 3 months on that board, the family that was over the children's home, which were now well up in their age, and they had decided that they was no longer going to be able to take care of children. They came to our board and said that they needed to resign, and so that left the house and the property open. At that time, the board turned to me, and knowing that I had a men's home and a women's home, and not really knowing the full vision of what God has called us to do, and talked to us about, you know, would y'all ever consider putting a children's home? So we did. We put together a proposal for them, and the board voted to give us the property for $1 a year. So it's kind of deja vu all over again. Definitely knew God's hand was in that as well too, no doubt. So then my search was to find someone to move in the house to keep kids. And we had a couple of families that were in our church at the time that I felt like would be good for that home. We went to talk to both of those families, and after a while of them praying about it, they turned us down and said they wouldn't be able to do that. We were going to pay their water bill and their power bill, and they just move in, and that was difficult of not knowing what God was doing after giving us that property. We get food from an organization called Midwest Food. One of their offices is in Newnan, Georgia. And we were down there one morning picking up food, and I noticed that they had a flyer on their desk that they were having a benefit auction for Midwest Food. I told them that I do auctioneering on the side, and I would love to come and do that for them for free. Wouldn't cost them a dime. I remember the lady saying that she already had somebody, and I said, well, put me down for next year, because I'll be glad to come and do it for free as much as y'all do for us here. Probably about a week before the auction, I had a phone call from the director of Midwest Food and asking me would I be willing to come do the auction, and they said the guy apparently had double booked and wasn't able to come. So I told him I would be there. There's a lady sitting beside me that asked me what our ministry did, and I told her we had a men's home and a women's home, and we've got a children's home on 40 acres, and we're trying to get it up and started. And Miss Willie got up and started speaking that night, and she had talked about all the ministry that she had done all over the country and really all over the world. So when she got done, she said, I want y'all to pray for me. She said, I'm at a crossroads in my life, and she said, I know God's got something he wants me to do, and she said, I know it's got to do with something with children, and it's somewhere on a farm. I don't know what it is. As I was sitting there, the lady beside me that did not know me, she punched me, and she punched me in the arm. She said, did you hear what she said? And I said, yes, I did. Because at that point, I was kind of numb, because I'm like, Lord, you didn't bring me to Peachtree City to find the person that's going to be over the children's home. And then she punched me again. She said, well, are you going to go talk to her or what? And I said, well, I guess I am.
What I was saying in my speech at the end was that God was calling me something deeper. And I could see a farm, and I could see children. And didn't know, I asked the group to pray for me, that God would reveal to me where I was supposed to be. After everything was over, the whole program was over, Pastor Jason came up to me and said, hey, I'm Jason Slaughter, and I have a ministry up in Cedartown, Georgia. You probably never heard of it. I said, no, I have not. So he gave me his card. He said, well, call me. He said, I need to talk to you. I have a farm. And wow, the light bulb came on and the wheels started turning. I said, God, you're on to something here. I know you are.
So a couple of weeks went by, and she gave me a call. We stayed on the phone for about an hour. Talking about ministry and war stories of what the struggles and stuff that we went through. She lived down in Stockbridge, Georgia, which was a pretty good ride from Cedartown to Stockbridge. And but she'd come 2 or 3 different times. She went over and looked at the property. Finally, one Friday morning, I called Miss Willie and I said, Miss Willie, what are you doing? So she loaded up and came to Cedartown, and we sat down, and I told her, I said, Miss Willie, I need you.
I told him, these 2 things are holding me from not coming here because I feel God's call right now on this. But my mom is deathly sick, and I can't leave and just leave her there because I have to help take care of her. And then I have a home there in Stockbridge, so that's holding me there too. Inside of 2 weeks after I had talked with him, my mom went to the hospital, and she passed away. I said, okay, God.
I was on the road that following Monday to a basketball game in Chattanooga, and I get a phone call from Miss Willie, and she said, Pastor, you ain't going to believe what happened. She said, this pastor friend of mine called me and was looking for a house for him and his wife to move to. And she said, I'm going tomorrow to sign the lease on my house to this pastor friend. She said, this is the Lord. I know this is God. We got Miss Willie moved in. Our ministry was dealt a blow, a setback. The building that we were renting out, that we were paying $2,000 a month, they went up on our rent to $3,000 a month. We were barely making ends meet. I felt the strain of that, and our church also was in that building. I remember the person that owned the building coming to our board and meeting with them and our board saying this is all we can pay. And the next morning we woke up and there was 2 4x8 pieces of plywood for rent on our building. So, you know, I didn't know what God was doing. I knew He had done amazing things. I mean, going back to my 10-year plan, and here we were 36 months in, and we've had the men's home, the women's home, and the children's home, and now this. Our church family had met over to Miss Willie's and doing the final touches on helping her move in, trimming bushes and cleaning the yard up. I was there. I didn't want to be there. I'll be honest. I was having a hard time with dealing with all the pressure. And I remember picking up a rake that day and just raking and pretending I was raking. And I remember looking up on the hill and watching everybody helping and the Lord speaking to my spirit, and He said, have I ever let you down one time? And kind of going off to myself, off in the edge of the woods over there, I got down on my knees and said, Lord, I'm sorry, but I can't see what you're doing. And I can say that if anybody's been in any kind of walk with the Lord, the toughest part is not knowing where He's taking you to.
The children's home, that has 40 acres of land. So that has the farm on it. That's the part of the piece that God was showing me, that was going to be a part of what I was going to be doing. But we didn't have a plan ready to actually start taking children from the community. So I said, well, Pastor Jason, let's do foster care first. Something's telling me we need to look into that area first. I had a family, the little boy was 5, his brother was 3, and his sister was 18 months old. We poured into them. That was one of the greatest success stories that we've had because they were reunited with their father. And that was a beautiful thing. The little boy used to call me Miss Willie. I said, I didn't know I had that many syllables in my name, but he was such a sweet child. And they tell me now at DFACS when they see him in the store, he says, how's Miss Willie? I said, wow, I really miss him. And you know, that's the thing about it. You lose track of the children, but you don't lose track of the memories. Those things are there forever. It just gave me a sense of, I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Now, I've had other children that have come into the home. They didn't get reunited with family. But I was still able to speak some life into them, to try and show them that above all else, God is their Heavenly Father. That was the greatest piece of what we were doing was they were involved in church. They were involved in youth activities. We couldn't do this without God being in the center of all of this.
We had a building on the other side of town that's kind of always been on our wish list if we could ever have the money on the north end of town. And so we went back to the Tripp Foundation, and I laid my heart out to them. I told them what we had accomplished. They had left me that day with some things to go and try to get accomplished. One of them was try to get the cost of the building down. They asked me to do a soil analysis on the building. They also had asked me to do a structural engineer study on the building to make sure that the integrity of the building was still intact. We got a real estate agent in town to work with us. We offered the gentleman $200,000 for the building. I think he was asking maybe $400,000 for it at the time. I never will forget, I was working at an auction, and this man came up to where I was working and in front of everybody basically said a few choice words and said I never would own his building. The real estate agent called me that afternoon and asked me had I seen him, and I said, yeah, I have. And he came up and basically, you know, cussed me out in front of everybody where I was working, which was extremely embarrassing. And I said, I don't want his building. He can keep it. I don't know, maybe a month rocked by and we were sitting there in that building. People were looking at the building we were in for rent. And at any moment, I mean, we didn't have a lease on the building. At any moment, we could have just, you know, had to pack up and leave. And I get a phone call from the real estate agent that the man who owned the property that we were trying to get on North Main had showed up at her office and said he laid down a price for $250,000 and said don't come back with anything else. So we took that and we went back to the Tripp Foundation. The total price closing and all was going to be $258,000. And I remember that night that I met with them, I was the 7th person on the agenda.
I presented to them what they asked me to present to them. No questions. They didn't ask me no questions, didn't look at me.
The attorney at the Tripp Foundation thanked me for coming.
Just kind of odd, to say the least. We walked out of the room, and the real estate agent, she said, that didn't go well, did it? And I said, no, it was kind of different. So I went home that night. I didn't sleep a wink. I remember staying up all night because I felt like the only opportunity that I had to be able to save this thing had failed. So the next morning I got to the store, and the real estate agent had called and said, have you heard anything? And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, do you mind if I call the Tripp Foundation's attorney? And I said, well, I don't mind. I said, you can, help yourself. I don't care. This lady calls me back on the phone, and she's in tears. And she says, you're not going to believe this. And I said, what? She said, they're giving you the $258,000 to buy the building. And this is the part that kind of got me. She says, the attorney's about to call you, but act like you don't know it. So I said, Cindy, listen, I've never had nobody to give me $1,000, much less $258,000, but I'll try my best not to act like I know it, that they're giving it to me. It was what the attorney said that day on the phone that got me. He said, the Tripp Foundation appreciates what you're doing, and they know that you're doing the right thing. And they said that they wanted me to let you know that if you ever needed anything else, that you could always come back to them. The Tripp Foundation has been very instrumental in getting our ministry up and running and getting it started, and I never would want to pass without saying that. They've been tremendous to us. We moved into our new store, and we began to repair that. And there were so many things that needed to be done. We have people in our community coming in and helping us with the electrical part of it and the plumbing and different things, and helping us try to get it set up and get it started. We went from paying $2,000 a month to paying nothing a month, which really helped our ministry out.
If I should speak, then let it be of the grace that is greater than all my sin, of when justice was served and where mercy wins, of the kindness of Jesus.
My troubles began as a child. From the ages of 9 to 11 years old, I was being molested. And so that led me down a path of insecurities and later on drug addiction. The Lord's always been with me. From the age roughly about 11 years old, I got saved at my church that we used to go to, and it was a feeling that I'll never forget. The Holy Ghost entered my body, but as I struggled through my addictions, it was hard for me to maintain a way of living a successful life when I felt dirty and all these things inside which stemmed from my abuse. So I stayed with the drugs, which kind of eased that a little bit. But as I got older, it became a thorn in my side. I couldn't really keep a job for any period of time. I was constantly unhappy, just wanting to change. And anyway, as my mother, she had ovarian cancer for 25 years. It was a blessing that she was able to live that long with it. And, I was a mama's boy. My mother was everything to me. She was good as gold. And on her deathbed, she wanted me, her wish for me was to get clean, because she know how I am when I'm not in my addiction. I'm a functionable man for the most part, and I'm unhappy when I'm in it. So on her deathbed, she wanted me to get help. And so to honor her as well as get my life back in order, my cousin was in the program, and he told me about it, and he'd already been praying for my mother and praying for me, and so he's like, I've been waiting on your phone call, I've been waiting on you to want to get this help. So he set it up to where he ran it by Pastor Jason Slaughter and Jeff Arnold, and they allowed me to come in the program. It's a very loving house, and when you're coming in from addiction and stemming from different things in your life where you felt a lot of hatred from other people and hatred within myself. I had a lot of anger when I come into the program. I was broken. And When I got to the program, I was welcomed with open arms, and everybody was very happy to see me there, and that was an inspiration to me. But when we started working into the warehouse, you wouldn't think that just moving boxes and doing the little everyday thing that we do in the program, it's a little bit monotonous at first. They're like, just give it time. You know what I'm saying? There's a method to this. Pastor Jason Slaughter, he knows this. He knew that this is doing God's will, and there's therapy in this. And as I look back on it, in the short time that I've been there, the 4 months, I've changed so much. I've let go a lot of the hatred that I've had, a lot of my anger issues.
A store came available in Rome. Jason found it, and he said, we need a presence in Rome. Would you be interested in helping us with a Rome store? Like, sure, if it'll help the ministry. Well, in the first month, it wasn't as much as how much we were selling. A woman came in and talked to me and Jason, and had a drug problem in her family. And her husband's brother's wife come in our program, which led to her husband's brother coming into the program, which led to his good friend coming into the program, and his wife coming into the program. None of these families at the time had their kids. And that one conversation at that thrift store in Rome got those two couples in the ministry, got them, helped them with their sobriety and helped them get jobs and helped them get houses. Pastor just kind of laughed and smiled, and he said, well, that thrift store is either doing its job or done its job. I don't know, God will tell us. But that one day, that store being there led to that, which in turn led to the same woman that talked to him, his whole family getting baptized right down here in the creek by a pastor. The dynamic of that building, that God has put everything together, and the story is amazing, and it is one of a kind.
One day we had a man walk in our store. His family was a part of a church out on the south end of town, and the church had got down to about 4 families left in the church, and they wanted us to come out and meet with them. They was walking around showing us the property, showing us the church, and didn't know if they wanted to sell the property or meet a pastor. They came inside and said they had prayed about it and wanted to donate the church building and the property to our ministry. We got in and done some remodeling there on that church, and through everything we've done, the Lord's saved the church all the way through that process. That we never went Sunday without having a service. Basically, we've been donated about $1.5 million worth of property, and we still got $76 in it all. That's how amazing God is. I mean, He has really, truly blessed us by opening up amazing doors of opportunity that only He can.
Since turning my life over to God, my life has purpose, and I've always known that I have a calling on my life. And since coming to Community Share, I became the director of the women's home. Amen. And that's my calling. And I love what I do. I love working with the women. I love seeing them come alive. I love watching the color come back in their faces, the smiles come back. It's just amazing what this program has done for me and what God has done for me.
And I'm so thankful because I never had a female friend in my entire life. And the Lord has placed me in a house full of women. Now I have a family, I have sisters, and I have friends that I could lean on, and it's amazing because I can call them up no matter what I'm going through, and they accept me for who I am.
We've all suffered the same things, but I never knew life could be like it is here. I thought it was just doomed destiny, but Community Share just made me alive and made me realize that, there is happiness, there is people you can trust, there's people that love you and don't want anything from you. That's what Pastor tells us. Yeah. When we first get here, we love you and we don't want nothing from you, but as you're here longer, you realize that's a fact.
I left from out at Piedmont Highway. That was the original children's home, and that's where the 40 acres of land are. And I moved here because I wanted to do teenagers. I wanted to see if I could step up, and because so much was going on in the community with teenagers just being lost, just involved in all kinds of things. They are hurting. There's so much fractured relationships. There's so much anger. There's a lot of anger, and they have a right to be angry. They have a right to be raised in a home where they're loved and their needs are met, and that they have been the greatest challenge. I do see that this is an ongoing thing. I'm not walking away from it. God has called me to it, and I'm going to do it. But one of the other things that I'm involved in is doing mentoring and tutoring with children. So that's another piece of how this ministry reaches out into the community, because there's a void, there's a need for it to minister to other children in the community, those who are in areas that people don't go into those areas. But I think God has just called me to be an ambassador here in Cedartown, Georgia. He just called me to minister to children, foster care, not foster care, children just who have a need to know God and to know Him in a meaningful way.
Our biggest trouble is we're always full, and that's our goal, is to be able to open up more room and more space to help more people out. I also love children. Me and my wife, we foster. Through it all, the association come back and donated the property, the 40 acres, to our ministry through the Baptist Association. And we're putting together something called the Safe Haven Ranch. And it's going to be a community, sort of like a subdivision community of foster homes. The first like it in the state of Georgia, actually. And they'll have several homes on there. The original home that we have is called the Hallelujah Haven. And each home will have its own name that will go along with Haven. A place for protection for these kids. And in the middle of that area, there will be a common area, a building that's set up where kids can come and have tutoring and meet their siblings or have birthday parties or what that may be. So our goal here at this ministry is to grow in those areas and to develop that land on that property for Safe Haven Ranch and give more people the opportunity to be able to help these children. I want to say this, I remember when me and my wife was going through our classes to foster, and I believe God had to show me this to make me understand it. That particular night we were going into our class, and there was a couple of kids, they were at the DFAC's office, and they were getting in a car, and they had their clothes with them, and I found out later that they were going down to below Macon. They didn't have any foster homes open around there for them to go to. I remember that night, that little boy getting out of the car, and he had to be 7 or 8 years old, and he yelled at Miss, the lady there at the DFAC's office, Miss Robin, and said, "Miss Robin, will you tell my teacher, Miss Tuck, that I'm gonna be okay?" He said, "Because she'll be worried about me." And it did something to me that night. To realize that kid was going to a different community, a different home, and was probably going to wake up the next morning going to a different school, which none of that being his fault. So our goals is to be able to foster and take care of the kids and in these communities that we're living in, and make sure the impact of what's going on is bad enough, but it makes sure that it ain't totally so bad that these kids lose hope and everything. A few years ago back, God impressed on my heart about something called the Compassion Givers. That's where someone can give $30 to $50 to $100 a month to our program. What's unique about what we do is we actually, like if you give $30 a month through the Compassion Givers, we in turn send you back $30 worth of vouchers. What we say is, you give to us, we give back to you, and now go bless somebody with those vouchers. If somebody's in need of toilet paper or paper towels, diapers, cleaning supplies, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, whatever's in our store, they can actually come in that store and use those vouchers to be able to get those items. So that's the benefit of what I feel like has set us apart from any other organization. There's a lot of good organizations out there that want you to give, but we say give to us, we give back to you, and we give you an opportunity to go find somebody to bless, which is really what we should be doing anyway.
Because if you're looking for somebody in need, guess what? You're doing the same things that Jesus Christ did when he walked this face of the earth. He followed the trail of those who were hurting, and he prayed on those who were weak and those who needed help.
I've never been to a doctor. They referred me to this doctor. I've never been to one that just offers various tests. I said, well, if you don't mind, could you just do some blood work and see if, if everything checks out? So they did blood work on me, and they found out that I had a blood condition. I came back a month later. They was going to see exactly what genotype it was. Well, I told everybody at the store, and Pastor Jason Slaughter and everybody got around me, and we prayed, and they anointed me with oil, and we prayed for this condition to go away. A month later, I went back to find out exactly what genotype that this blood condition was, and it was gone. And to double check, they set me up to do the most thorough testing they had a month after that. So within 2 months' time, the blood condition that I came back positive with was totally gone. And so I'm cured, and which is a blessing in itself.
The reason I want this story told is I want to be a diving board of faith for others, that they can do ministry work as well. There's a lot going on in the world that we're living in, and there's a lot of room for people to open up ministries all over. When I first started the ministry, went over to Anniston, Alabama to meet with Pastor Burns, a gentleman over the ministry called Center of Hope. I remember sitting in his office, and I was telling him about all that I didn't have. And he said, well, start with what you do have, and God will multiply that. Then he gave me some advice that I never have forgotten. He looked at me and said, son, the Lord come out with just do it before Nike ever thought about it. And he said, if God's called you to do it, he said, just go do it. We solely operate under $150,000 a year. That's hard for me to even believe that we can do what the things that we've done. But that's through Christ. The Bible says if you'll decrease, he said, I'll increase. So that's all we get to see every day. And our motto at our ministry is we just show up and try to catch up. And I'm thankful for what God's doing, and I'm thankful that he's going to do even more in the future. I know without a doubt there's other people out there that can start ministries and do the work of the Lord, and we need that. We need that more and more. We need people to birth more ministries. Just step out on faith, let the Lord do it. I know on my best day, I ain't this smart to be able to put this together and the way God has done it and what he's given us, and that's my thing, is just say, hey, just do it.
Praising my Savior all the day long.